Well, this is an absolute joy. I am here today with Alice Sheldon. After graduating from Oxford University with an MA in psychology and neurophysiology, Alice's strong interest in how we can contribute to the creation of a more inclusive world took her on a career journey which included being a secondary school teacher, a barrister, and the head of the bar's national pro bono charity, Advocate. And it was during that time that Alice came across two life-changing pieces of understanding. The first was psychotherapy, and the second was nonviolent communication, NVC. She became a certified trainer with the Centre for Nonviolent Communication. And she developed a model of partnership parenting, which has helped hundreds of fellow parents to create thriving relationships with their children. And this became the springboard for her creation of the broader needs understanding model, which brings a partnership approach into all spheres of life. And she now shares that approach globally with individuals and organizations. And brilliantly, she's also put it into a book, Why Weren't We Taught This at School, which is out now this week when this podcast goes out. So welcome to the show, Alice. It's just brilliant to have you here.
Thank you very much for having me.
Oh, it's always a joy when I've sort of been involved right from the start of a book, and I get to reflect back on that whole journey. So I'm looking forward to this.
Well, I really remember from the beginning, actually, just joking that this day would come.
Yes, and here we are.
And here we are. So it is a real pleasure. I kind of feel we need the champagne, but yeah, it's great to be here.
Yes, it could go quite downhill quite quickly if we're popping the champagne.
That's true.
Yeah, we can maybe do that after we've pressed end.
Perfect.
But I want to start with needs understanding and the whole concept, because I remember, when we were talking about the beginning and I was telling you, what is it? And you were grappling to explain it and we didn't have a phrase for it. So tell us what it is. Show us how far you've come. And also,
no pressure.
And also where that name came from in the end.
Yeah, absolutely. So it turns out that there is a really helpful way of looking at the world that no one teaches most of us. And it's when we start to understand ourselves and other people and the world around us through the lens of our shared human needs. So these aren't just food and water and the sort of survival needs, but they're the deeper emotional and psychological, spiritual needs that we have. For example, fun or belonging or creativity. And probably the easiest way for me to explain it then and now is through an example. So I'll use the example as you've just waved the book that I go through in chapter 1 to help the reader to understand what this looks like. And the core principle is that is to interpret everything that I do or that someone else does as an attempt to meet those needs. So this is an example, a parenting example, but I hope that people will easily be able to translate it into the professional sphere as well, because needs understanding, of course, operates both in our personal life and our professional life. And so this is, as the parent of a young child, I imagine this to be familiar. You're trying to get out of the door. Child is completely refusing to put a coat on. Child wants to stay and play with toys. Child had agreed to go out earlier on whilst you were kind of, pushing Polly Pocket around the floor, and child is now refusing. So I don't know about you, but in my household, I would, quite easily run through a gamut of parenting kind of, bribery and persuasion, and you said you would, and, and generally dissolve in shouting at the end of it, and everyone's unhappy. So if I put the needs understanding framework over the top of that, then what I ask myself is, what am I needing when I'm looking to go out to the cafe? What am I needing? And everyone would have different needs in that situation. But for me, the key needs, or two of the key needs, are about aliveness. I need to have a sense of connection and aliveness that I don't get if I sit on the floor all day playing Polly Pocket. And the second thing is something about knowing I matter. And I'll come back to that one in a second. For my child, maybe it's something about choice. It often is with younger children in particular. They don't get a lot of choice in society, but also about, she's wanting me to hear her, she's wanting to be heard. There may be a range of other things, to have fun, of course, because she's playing. So So what needs understanding says then is if I actually connect with those needs instead of just arguing about the coat, what happens? And I'll say, I know we're time limited, Alison, but it does feel important just to spend time on this right up front. So the first thing that happens in the four kind of skill areas that I talk about in the book, the first thing that happens is that I will talk differently with my child. I might empathize with her. So I might say to her, instead of any of my other strategies, I might say to her, I can see that you really want to stay and play now. I can see you're having such fun here. I'm not trying to fix it. I'm just being with her. And that's very powerful. So there's a section of the book about empathy at work, at home, it doesn't matter. It's the same underlying principles applied slightly differently. The second thing is that I empathize with myself. And I said I'd come back to the need to matter because this is often a key moment for needs understanding learners is knowing that we have fingerprint needs that get triggered. So when you get triggered into usually either anger or shame, it's usually because there's a very old need being touched on, one from my past where I didn't feel I mattered in my family. So my daughter, of course, it's not her job to make me feel I matter. But if she doesn't put her coat on, I'm left some childish part of me feeling like, well, what about me? I don't matter. And that, if I know that, I can interrupt that in ways I explain in the book. Last two bits quicker to explain. When I speak, I'm more likely to stop arguing about whether or not to put the coat on. That's just the strategy. It's not really what the debate's about. The debate is about what's going on underneath. So I'm less likely to talk about putting the coat on or not and start talking about my needs for aliveness and her needs for fun and how we might be able to meet all of those needs. And the very final part is a lovely bit about problem solving and bringing her on board. And in this instance, it's remarkable how easy it is for that other person to come on board and say, yeah, I'll hold all those needs with you and let's find a way forward. I promise that's the longest monologue I'll do throughout this conversation, but it did feel important just to be clear about it up front.
No, it's brilliant. And it actually is a really, really good example of how giving an example brings a topic alive, because it's quite easy to talk about this sort of stuff in very abstract terms. And we start to struggle because we're not really designed to think about when you tell a story and when you put it into a situation that we can all identify with, then suddenly it makes sense. And yeah, I mean, certainly if you have, as you say, been the parent of a small child trying to get them out the door when they don't want to go, that will resonate with you. But you can also map it across, I'm sure, to any kind of situation where you've been feeling like you've been surrounded by idiots and people who just don't okay. Yeah. So it's very, very powerful. So thank you for giving that example.
Yeah.
What I also love, I should say personally, been transformational in my parenting. So thank you for that. But also, it's really interesting how it's both of you. It's not simply about understanding someone else's needs so you can get more out of them. It's also about understanding your own, and not about becoming a doormat, but about bringing that person on board to help you meet both of them. So that's really, really powerful. Needs understanding sounds now really obvious. Of course, that's the word that you would use to describe this. It didn't feel like that way at the time, did it?
It really didn't. I mean, you and I had many conversations and pinging backwards and forwards of ideas, along with other people in my wider kind of community, and it was really hard to arrive at. And I think the central point of grappling is that needs is not a very comfortable word. In the English language, it's got all kinds of connotations of neediness, and even if it is used in the same kind of sphere as I'm using it, then it might be used in different ways. It gets muddled up as a verb and a noun. So we did really struggle with it. But in the end, I'm very, very glad with where we've ended up. Because I think it's what one of the beauties for me of this volume of work. I'm not someone who likes to have like 23 checklists in my mind when I'm trying to know how to live. And what I love about this is if you forget everything else actually and remember what are the needs, that's already, you're halfway there. So having it named right up front, I think was important in the end.
And yes, I agree. And one of the other challenges that I know you face was, and related to that really, was normally when you deliver this sort of work, when you're engaging people in experiencing it, you're in the room with them and you're taking them through and you're doing it's very experiential. You're a very people person. That one way around.
I'll take any of it, yeah.
And suddenly you've got to put that into a book. and you're not in the room with the person, you don't know their situation, and you can't show them what you mean and do it kind of, in real time with them. And I know you really struggled with that. What did you discover through that process of having to think how to present it when you're not there with them?
But you're absolutely right. And I think I discovered two things. One is that it was really important to me to try to do as well as I could with that. That wasn't one of the things in the book that I could compromise on, because the magic that I experience happening when I'm in a room, of course it looks different in a book, but I wanted some of that magic to come across because, obviously this stuff really matters to me, and I've seen it transform people in large and small ways. So I didn't want to lose that because the connection had got lost. So that was the first thing I learned. The second thing I learned was that I needed help. Like, clearly I couldn't do this on my own. And that was quite an early learning for me, that I was going to need to really draw on all kinds of different sorts of support.
Well, let's dig into that a bit, because you have written a book. You are not one of the world's natural writers, are you? This is not your preferred mode. Tell us about how you write a book without writing a book.
So, I mean, again, it's so lovely to sit here and laugh with you about it because, as you'll know, I really tried very, very hard to write, and I'm really not used to failing at something. I have a sort of strong academic record, but the first time that I showed chapter 1, which I had kind of, agonized over, to an author and writing coach, she looked at it, and I think, quite apart from the volume of red pen that was on it, it was also the word unreadable that really kind of threw me. And I remember that you and I had a conversation at that point. I dissolved into a quivering jelly, this book that I want to write. Oh my God, I can't write it. And you were a little more diplomatic, but I mean, essentially the message was the same. In the format it was unreadable. Fortunately, we came up with a different strategy. Nice to get the need strategy division there. Different strategy, which was to bring on board the wonderful Ginny Carter, who wrote alongside me. So we were a team on the book, and that was just an amazing gift in so many ways. So yes, I'm very grateful to you for the recommendation, and to Ginny for the amazing job that she's done.
Yeah, she's pretty good, isn't she? Ginny, formerly of this podcast, Carter. Yes. What made that partnership work so well, do you think?
Well, it's really interesting because, again, we're very different people. And I mean, the thing I think that at the bottom of it, what made it work really well was that we both really respected the other person's skill.
Yeah.
So I think it's fair to say that she could see what I was bringing, and certainly I could see what she was bringing. I do. I teach this stuff for a reason. And so the amount of mental chatter about, does she like me? Does she think I'm doing this, in a good way? Am I just the worst sort of author? All of this stuff, it actually doesn't happen very much. So that's great, because it just it left me free to deal with actually what was coming up between us. So when there were glitches, and certainly there were points where one or other of us had a misunderstanding by email, or I was very unwilling to let go of an idea, or she was thinking about how to phrase something, it just left it quite clear to be able to communicate that. And so I remember Ginny saying that there was a point at which I remember her saying, and I hope I quote her accurately, that she found it very easy to receive feedback from me. And I didn't hold back on feedback, I have to say. But the reason she found it easy was because it never felt personal. And certainly for me, it felt very clean to deliver, again, just because the relationship was clear. So yeah, it was a real delight. And I feel very excited about the time when we actually managed to meet in person, because of course all of this has been in different parts of the country during COVID times. So yeah.
We're speaking pre-launch party. Cannot wait. Very much looking forward to it. But it's interesting, that point you make about the nature of the relationship and the ability to get the job done in what could actually be quite a vulnerable situation, or a difficult situation where you've got competing priorities, and putting any kind of writing makes you feel vulnerable. But because you're using the principles of that relationship management, you're actually free then to just get on with the job, aren't you?
Yeah.
It's quite interesting.
Yeah, and it was fantastic having another close team member on board who really knew the material well. And I still remember with delight when you and I had come up with what we thought was an excellent analogy to use, which was a prism splitting light into different colours. And I went back and I said, Alison and I have come up with this excellent analogy and metaphor, and let's put it in. And she was like, I don't think that works, Alice. I'm having real heartbacks to my physics lessons. No, we're not using that. And it was a lot of fun, as well as there was all of the pressure of this matters a lot to me, and I really want to get it at the level I want it to be. And Ginny has absolutely achieved that. I'm so delighted.
And what's lovely as well is it's your voice, which I think is such a skill of hers, isn't it? It's great.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's, that links into the sort of book friends group that we might touch on. Let's go there. And so when I asked for feedback on the voice, when 10 people came back and said it sounds like you, I was like, right, job done. That's great.
And it's an absolutely kind of natural segue from working with Ginny and that sense of seeking help where you need it. You are a person who is very much resourced by people. And I think you said to me very, very quickly, I'm going to need lots of support around me to do this. And I don't think I've ever seen anybody do it quite so naturally, elegantly, effectively. Tell us about Book Friends.
Oh, I love that. Elegantly. I'm gonna save that. So Book Friends was started right at the beginning of the writing process, exactly as you say. I love the way you put it. I am resourced by people. So what I did, people kept saying, "Oh, you need to. If you're seeking support, you need to give them something in return." And right through this book, I needed to find what was true for me. And actually, what I did was I just asked people who were really interested to hear about this book, because, of course, the wonderful thing about this book is it's not about a narrow area of life. So it's potentially very attractive to all kinds of people. So when people expressed interest in the book, I would just say to them, if you'd like to come and join my support team, you don't have to do anything. It's a Facebook group. I will join you up to the group. There's no pressure to comment, like, even read anything. And it's a place where I can lean in and ask for support. And then people who are able to give it, who do have capacity, can meet me in that. And so I didn't have a thing for people that they were going to get. It was just how I do my relationships, which was to be quite straight down the line and say, I really would love some help. And if it doesn't fit for you, absolutely fine. And so that group has just been, quite remarkable. They've read, we published, didn't we, all the initial drafts just freely for people to comment on, and people helped me with the cover and the tone and anything really that there was, anything that I was worrying about. I just would put a little note in there, and someone would send me a big hug or something useful, So yeah, they've been great, and of course that team is now shifting over to become to grow and to become the team that will support the first year of the book going forwards, which is delightful.
It's really interesting, isn't it, that you're right. There's so much received wisdom about your lead magnet, how you can attract people and so on. And it was really quite radical just to say, it's up to you. But if you'd like to, if you're interested, then do join me. And I think that intrinsic, it's a very different. It's a more human relationship, isn't it, than the transactional one. And that changed the quality, I think, of the nature of the people in the group and their expectations of it.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right, and it's interesting. I love that you use the word intrinsic because, of course, that again is a piece that comes up in one of the chapters of the book, which is around how we make requests
Mm.
and also how we it comes up in a parenting situation, or not a parenting one actually, I can't remember, anyway, whatever context it comes up in, but this idea that when we reward people, we're fixing their eyes on what's going on outside of them rather than on what's going on inside of them. So it's a much cleaner way to be able to request support if you know that you've given people the opportunity to say no. Because if you've given them the opportunity to say no, then when they say yes, you can really trust the yes. And we're not good at that in our society, actually. And I think we suffer because of it.
Mm. I would normally, about now, Alice, be asking someone for their best tip for someone who's about to write their business book or who's involved in the early stages of writing their business book. I'm still going to ask you, I mean, I know that it's very interesting, actually. Side note, when we do our Friday campfires, we do our writing sprints. Alice, you do a thinking sprint, don't you? Very occasionally writes me down, but this is mind mode. It's a bit different to yours. It's not writing, but actually, writing a book is so much more than physically writing a book. It's about structuring and thinking through the examples and finding the metaphors, and then of course it's all about, as you say, coordinating the people, getting the marketing together and the launch team and so on. So from that breadth of experience, what would be your sort of single best tip for somebody about to embark on that?
So I do have one, but I am also going to allow myself a side note too, because Friday campfires. What has been really amazing for me is to be included in those campfires, even though I don't have books to recommend usually, and I don't write. And but it's more important than that, because for a long time, as a child, I would feel different, but if I allowed myself to express that difference, I didn't belong. And so here I can be different, but I'm just one with everyone else. I'm not special any more than anybody else. I'm just like everybody else, but doing things a bit differently. And that is absolutely thanks to you and the way that you have set the whole thing up. So that's my side note. Back
Thank you.
the back to the tip. Actually, I do have one, and it leads on from what we were talking about just now. What I would say is just encourage you to find your path with writing your book. So exactly that. Try to really check in with what's true for you. And if
Mm.
what someone else is suggesting doesn't fit, that's okay. And either you'll talk about it and find a way that it can fit, or actually it's not for you. So I know it's a little bit unspecific, but I think there was a point, Alison, where you and I were talking about marketing, and we came up, with the sort of Alice shaped marketing plan. And I would encourage every author to have their own book shaped plan and their own marketing shaped plan that is theirs, because it yeah, that is what I think creates creates the books that really reflect our own message, and that are really full of kind of integrity. Yeah.
Yeah. And there's so many templates out there, aren't there? There's so many sort of 5-step plans for marketing your book, and this is the way you do it, and so on. And actually, of course, what that does is means that you're not playing to your strengths. And when you create the Alice shaped plan, the whatever your name is shaped plan, then you identify your zone of genius,
That's
and
right.
you really play to it, and you have the courage to lean into that. And it means nobody else is going to do it that way, which is really exciting and great for the people to be involved in because of the energy with that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
brilliant.
absolutely.
And again, I normally ask somebody to recommend a business book. I'm going to extend it right out. Tell us something that apart from other people that resources you, or something that you enjoy, and what you might recommend to other people.
So I have actually got a book. I'm not sure I'd describe it quite as a business book,
Oh,
but
that's all right.
you won't be surprised to see what it is. I can't see myself, so no, you can see what it is. There we go. Right. So this is the amazing Nonviolent Communication: A Language of Life by Marshall Rosenberg, and It is an extraordinary book. So famously, Satya Nadella, when he took over Microsoft, gave it to all his senior execs to read. And if if you sort of like the sound of what you're hearing from me, this is a much earlier kind of take on it, and there's a lot in this book that I think is great. So that is the one that I would encourage.
That is brilliant. And I hadn't heard of nonviolent communication. I don't know how I hadn't heard of it until I met you. It really, I do feel it should be. Why weren't we taught this at school? You know, it's one of those sort of foundational principles to have in your head whenever you are, but well, not just in conflict, whenever you're dealing with other people in any relationship, really.
That's right. And I think what's amazing about it is that it can dive very deep if you want it to, or it can stay on the surface. And I love that kind of range of inclusivity. If you just want some good ways of sending emails that are more likely to land, it's covered.
It's tactical.
You know, if you want to understand why you're yelling at your child, it's covered. So yeah, it's a good book.
Cracking recommendation. Thank you very much. And Alice, if people want to find out more about you, more about the book, more about the work that you do with News Understanding, where should they go?
Well, I have a new website.
I know you do.
As we're recording this, I wouldn't say it's exactly live yet, but it will be live. So it's needs-understanding.com.
Brilliant. I will put that link up on the show notes at extraordinarybusinessbooks.com, obviously, along with the transcripts of this conversation. And it has been just such a joy talking to you, Alice. I'm so glad we're here. We got here.
So am I. I have to keep sort of slightly pinching myself, a bit like I did when I was abroad this summer. It's like not until my feet are in the sea. I would say one other thing, Alison, sorry, just about the contact things. If anyone feels a resonance with me and would like to come and just experience what it's like to be part of Team Book, which is the new Facebook group, that's also totally welcome. So I don't know how you do that. Let me know somehow. It would be through the website, wouldn't it? I think. So.
Fantastic. They can contact you through the website. Brilliant. And the book, I'll give you its full title, Why Weren't We Taught This at School? The Surprisingly Simple Secret to Transforming Life's Challenges by Alice Sheldon. Isn't it gorgeous? There you go. Brilliant. Thank you so much for your time today, Alice.
Thank you so much for having me.